This TEDx talk by Stephen Lurie explores the fascinating intersection of coma, consciousness, and cutting-edge neuroscience. The central theme revolves around understanding and measuring consciousness in patients with severe brain damage, particularly those in comatose or vegetative states. Lawrence discusses the use of advanced technologies like brain-computer interfaces and functional MRI to detect signs of consciousness even if establish communication with non-responsive patients. He highlights the importance of respecting the quality of life of these patients and challenges preconceived notions about their experiences. The talk also touches on ethical considerations like euthanasia and the significance of organ donation, urging viewers to consider advanced directives and the potential for life-saving generosity. How does our brain generate the consciousness? How does matter produce a subjective experience? For a long time, this has remained an exclusively philosophical question. It has become now a major scientific question because thanks to these new technologies, we have the means to measure what's happening in the brain. So I'm holding my own brain right here. In my hands is a 3D reconstruction, a 3D print of my gray matter obtained by MRI. It's tens of billions of neurons, thousands of billions of connections. That's more than the actual number of stars in our galaxy. Some say it's the most complex, the most complicated thing known to mankind, with one exception, the woman's brain. Seriously, I'd like to share with you some of our research on patients with severe damage to the brain who are in a coma. And for those who survive a coma, sometimes there are some incredible stories, near death experiences, those patients that tell us they left their own body, that they saw the light, that they had the experience of an extraordinary well-being feeling, and so this is also an appeal for witnesses. So if someone here has had such a near-death experience or knows someone who has, let them share it with us. We now have our over 200 accounts of near-death experiences at Yale University, and it's important because extraordinary phenomena need extraordinary evidence. To understand better and convince the medical and scientific community that ignored this phenomenon for too long, which for some is seen as a proof of life after death. And besides listening to those stories, we can watch what's happening in our brains, various techniques. Here you have an example where we can measure energy consumption. We inject some sugar, glucose marked with a radioactive isotope, that we can see gray matter activity. You can see a sectional view with yellow and red colors. These neurons are the most energy consuming cells compared to all the other cells, and next to them you can see the sign of an empty box. It's what happens in case of cerebral death. Only the few cells surrounding the skull inside the skin are still consuming energy, but those neurons don't anymore. Here you can trustfully donate your organs because if there is any scientific life after death, it's called organ donation. It's really different from what we can actually see in these patients who are about to survive coma and who will sometime awake but without showing any sign of consciousness. That's what we call a vegetative state. I find this term too pejorative. We now prefer to talk about non-responsive awakening because this is what we see. They are awakened, their eyes are wide open, but they don't respond to simple orders, and this is our conscience test. So, what we ask ourselves is what consciousness in this coma or after this coma in a vegetative or non-responding state. Now, we have a tool that we call brain-computer interfaces, where we can, you see here, electrodes on scale more than 250 that will measure the electric activity of the brain, and then we'll ask one question again, like move the foot. But we don't look at the foot anymore, we look at what's happening in the brain. I'll take my own brain again. Having two of them is handy. When I move my hand or I want to, there is a region in the gray matter right here that will activate itself and I can see it with the EEG. And when I move my hand, it's going to activate right here. When I move the foot, we'll see the activation closer to the center. So this allows us not only to see that the patient is not unconscious, that he responds to the command, but also to establish a communication at least with some of them. We have to admit the minority of the patients that can't speak anymore by definition, cannot move, control their muscles after a coma. There are other means like here trying to communicate with eyes. It turns out that when you make an effort like mental calculation, your pupil is going to dilate. So I can ask you an important question. Where does it hurt? This possibility of perceiving pain is really important and has direct consequences with our care. So, how does it work? We ask the question. We show a yes, and you've got to calculate mentally at the moment of seeing the yes that lead to pupillary dilatation. We can see it. In this case, we can't see anything. That's when you show the no that the camera will detect the pupil is dilating, so we can deduce the patient's communicators to us a no. Again, without moving any muscles, but there is a big problem here. The patient must understand the question. If he is aphasic and doesn't even understand language, what can he do? We developed some other techniques, measuring brain activity at rest. Actually, the brain never rests. It thinks. It thinks all the time. And we can try to visualize these thoughts. So as you can see, I'm taking my brain again. I'm gonna open it, and inside this brain, you have a network. We can call it self-consciousness network. So if you're thinking right now about your past, about planning your future, this little voice that talks to your inside, you're about to activate a network here at the front and here at the back. In this brain depth is the network of self-consciousness that you can see in yellow, and that in some patients considered in a pseudocoma, the locked-in syndrome, they are conscious patients, completely paralyzed, unable to speak, or classically only with little winks, that we can establish a communication. And at first, it's really difficult, whereas functional MRI, as you can see, is going to show these yellow regions, this activity, this network of self-consciousness, with, with, with the one that is really easy to identify, but we have to be careful. Sometimes pictures can lie. The brain doesn't produce any consciousness just like the kidney produces. Loris, there are a lot of things that we still don't understand. So we have to be cautious. And it's actually difficult to quantify consciousness, to reduce it to a figure, or to quantify pain. It's only really difficult to quantify the quality of life. Nevertheless, it has to be at the center of our interest. So I'd like here with you right now, try and get an answer to this difficult question. How are you? We are going to calibrate our own scale for the quality of life. So I'll ask you to identify the best moment of your life. That's plus 5. And then the worst moment of your life, your divorce, or your marriage minus 5. If you actually done that, I can now ask you the question. In the past 2 weeks, on a scale from minus 5 to plus 5, where are you at? Where we ask the same question to a locked up syndrome patient. You can't be more incapacitated than that. They are dependent on the others for all daily tasks. And here is the answer. The majority says that they have a life that's worth living. Don't judge a book by its cover. So you can see there is a minority here that says they aren't happy, a bad quality of life. We even asked the question about euthanasia, where there is a minority of patients that want to die, and contrary to Belgium in France, we didn't have a law that would allow it. So, to conclude, I think these new technologies, functional MRI, brain computer interface, allow us not only to be more precise in diagnostics, but sometimes they can even allow us to establish communication with non speaking patients. They showed that we have underestimated the capacity of consciousness to have a kind of consciousness during and after coma, to sometimes understanding the quality of life of some patients. And next to this medical and ethical interest, there is also a scientific interest where we are pushing boundaries further, demystifying the remaining big mystery that is human consciousness. So, I may have two main messages for you. That's first, to think about the interest of identifying a trusted person, to establish a will, an anticipated statement, just in case, and it can happen to any of us. After an accident, a head trauma, a heart attack, you fall into a coma. It's the right time to communicate your will. You should do it. Anticipate. And second point, you should think about the benefits of organ donations. Thank you.